Firstly, I would like to say a huge thank you to everyone who has sent me messages over the last week offering support and expressing their outrage at YouTube's frankly scandalous censorship of my video that discussed this year's Christmas adverts. My video was up for just 75 minutes before YouTube pulled it, and it already had over 800 views and over 200 likes, with hundreds of comments and only 3 dislikes. And despite YouTube pulling it for alleged hate speech, it had actually been checked by an English solicitor who passed it as legal under English law, which is much stricter than US law, as in English law there is no constitutional protection for free speech. So it definitely did not constitute any form of hate speech. I would like to also thank those who have re-uploaded the video. The way to beat this censorship is to be like a hydra. Every time a hydra has one of its heads cut off, 2 more grow back. So every time they pull a video, there has to be multiple fresh uploads of that video. They can't ever be allowed to silence the truth. Finally, I would also like to say a big thank you to all those who have invited me on their shows to talk about my video and have discussed the importance of exposing those pushing a multicultural agenda within these adverts. It genuinely has been heartwarming to receive so much support. So again, thank you to all those who showed me their support. And just for the record, feel free to download any of my videos and copy them to other channels, social networks, or share them with friends. This isn't about me getting hits or views. This is about spreading a message. So as far as I'm concerned, the more uploads, the better. You can see my original video on minds.com, as I've set up an account there, and all my videos will now appear there as well as on YouTube. I've placed a link to the video in the description below, as well as links to the re-uploads that have popped up on YouTube. If I can ask one more favour, please help out those who have re-uploaded the video. Sub their channels and share the video to social networks. Spread the message as far and wide as possible. And it's important to remember, it's not just me who has been hit by this. Other YouTubers have also been silenced for talking about this issue. This is about free speech and our right to criticise globalist corporations and the multicultural agenda they push. So now that the dust has settled on the incident, what are my thoughts? Well, firstly, it's clear to see who you can't criticise and what the large social networks are very uncomfortable with people talking about. But I know what you're thinking. Mark, you've talked about multiculturalism, immigration, and many other topics before, and you've never had a video pulled down. In fact, some people have said I've made far more hard-hitting videos in the past. Well, indeed, that is true. So why do I think this video was different? Why do I think it was pulled? Well, I not only talked about multiculturalism and multicultural propaganda, but I also talked about the fact that it is the globalist corporations that are complicit in pushing this agenda. But I went further still. I asked people to politely voice their concerns to these companies, and ultimately for people not to shop at these companies. I committed the cardinal sin of suggesting a boycott of these large high street retailers over the Christmas period. I asked people to vote with their wallets and shop elsewhere. After all, we are meant to live in a free society. If you don't like the message a company is pushing, why should you shop there? Why should you give them your hard-earned money? You're not forced to. You can choose to take your money elsewhere. Now that's a message these globalists don't want you to spread. They don't like you criticising their plans or the multicultural garbage they push, but they can tolerate that in small doses. What they can't and won't tolerate is you hitting them where it hurts, which is of course financially. They don't want squawking shareholders. They don't want a poor Christmas take. That's not part of the plan. They want to push their multicultural garbage upon the public, but they also want the public to carry on spending their money in their stores. Essentially, they want to have their cake and eat it. They want to have these subliminal political messages in their Christmas adverts. Ultimately, they want to subvert Christmas and use it for their own ends, and take both Christianity and the traditional European family out of any Christmas messages, using Christmas as a way to push multiculturalism and materialism, both of which have nothing to do with Christmas. But they don't want to experience any backlash for doing this. And the backlash against these Christmas adverts has been huge. Every single company that has ran one of these multicultural adverts has been on damage control. You only have to look at their YouTube channels to see this. Their dislikes have been rising, the negative comments are piling up, and clearly some of these companies have been manipulating their likes and deleting comments as a form of damage control. But for once, this isn't just an internet response. This isn't just a group of angry internet trolls at work. This has spilled over into the real world. There are people boycotting these companies, and some of these companies have had to publicly defend their adverts. They have had to release statements justifying their propaganda. And it's great to see these globalist corporations and the internationalists who control them on the back foot like this. And seeing these corporations turn to their friends in the media to write articles shaming those who don't want to shop in their stores is actually hilarious. I mean, imagine that. Corporations pushing multicultural propaganda upon the public, then the public turning their backs on these corporations, only for the corporations to call the customers they desperately rely on racists. To see these internationalists panicking because it might hit their bottom line, meaning that they can't afford the champagne for the shareholders meeting, fills my heart with joy. It's people power. However, despite the panic these internationalists are feeling, they simply can't step back from what they have done. But if they can't step back from what they have done and won't retract their adverts, what can they do? Well, this is the really insidious part of the damage control employed by these corporations. They are using their power to ban people from speaking out. The internationalists are banning criticism of their propaganda and censoring criticism of their aims and objectives, and they're desperate to shut down any talk of a boycott, as that's something they just won't tolerate. By acting in this way, they are not only highlighting their true intentions and the fact they aren't here to appeal to the majority or provide a service, but are in fact more concerned with pushing a multicultural agenda. But they are also displaying what power they have and how they will abuse that power to silence their opponents and censor those who dare to expose them. Now, when I was younger, I used to really enjoy science fiction, and one major theme of 80s and 90s sci-fi was huge corporations that dominated nations, the world, or even entire solar systems. These huge corporations would often have their own security forces that looked like police in riot gear. Sometimes the corporations would flat out have their own military. Sometimes they would own the police due to their wealth and power. But either way, these giant corporations would wield incredible influence, and their troops, large men dressed in police-style body armor, helmets and boots, would often be seen subjugating the population with their batons and shields, or sometimes even opening fire upon the public in order to quell any rebellions. This dystopian view of the future was common, and the idea that large corporations would become so powerful and control their own militarized units was a regular theme. These corporations would then control what people saw, what they were allowed to think, what they could buy, how they lived their lives, and anyone that showed any form of dissent got a visit from their thugs. Gatherings in the street would be broken up. Those who resisted would have their homes raided and be dragged off in the night. And organisations that dared to oppose these corporations would be violently hunted down and their leaders thrown in jail jail or even executed. But all this brutality wasn't coming from a government or from an evil dictator, but from companies that had got so large and so powerful that they controlled the population through fear and the threat of violence. But interestingly, with it being 2017, many of these films were based in a future that has already been and gone. Films about dystopian societies were set in the year 2000 or shortly after, and humanity has passed through those times, and we're still not living in a society where high street retailers have their own military wings that beat consumers over the head with clubs for daring to talk about things that the corporations don't want them to talk about. We haven't ended up in that dystopian future yet. Or maybe we have. Maybe these globalist companies do have huge power. Maybe they just exert that power in a way that is very different from the violence depicted in sci-fi films. Because these companies do push an insidious agenda and do wish to alter the behaviour of the public. And they have started to silence dissenting voices. They have started to use their great power to limit freedom of speech. They have used their powers to prevent freedom of association and to attempt to limit or suppress any boycotts or consumer actions that threaten them. The big difference is that they don't drag people off to re-education camps in the middle of the night. Instead, they screen adverts. These companies don't deploy shock troops or riot police to beat the public and break up public meetings. Instead, they censor free speech in other ways. They control the social networks and they ban people's accounts. They pull videos they don't agree with and hit people with spurious copyright claims. These companies buy influence in governments, which then pass anti-free speech laws. They collaborate with their friends in the media to ensure the public only see their narrative through the mainstream channels. The corporations control social networks, and you may not disappear in the night, but your profile will if you say the wrong thing, cutting you off from your friends, relatives, and loved ones. The internationalists haven't needed a military wing to their corporations because they are achieving their goals in a much more insidious way. They haven't needed to bundle people away in the night and drag them kicking and screaming to re-education centres. Families sit around the television by choice and actually look forward to their re-education classes. Burly men in body armour don't need to club people over the head for standing in the street telling the truth, as people don't tell the truth by shouting it out in the street anymore. They tell the truth on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. So the corporations just pull the videos that speak the truth or delete the posts, and rather than throwing those who create them in jail, they simply deactivate their accounts so they disappear in that way. The internationalists don't need to break up public gatherings with riot police because people now gather in online groups and discuss issues on threads on social networks, so they ban the groups and pull down the pages they disagree with. And that's a lot easier than burning down the town hall and baton charging a rally of dissenting consumers. The dystopian future depicted in sci-fi films might not have played out as many writers had once imagined, but that doesn't mean these globalist corporations haven't exerted their power in other ways. Due to the changes in the way we communicate and the way we interact with one another, the corporations don't need shock troops, because the social networks and platforms we use to spread alternative messages that are critical of the multicultural agenda are owned by the same internationalists as the corporations. So they censor us, they shut us down, because just like the mega corporations in a sci-fi novel, these globalist conglomerates are terrified of an uprising. They are terrified of people power, and whilst they wish to push their insidious agenda, they don't want any dissent whatsoever. They want to feed us their multicultural rubbish, but they want us to carry on being the good little consumers and keep spending all our hard-earned money in their stores. But we can be beat them. We can become the Hydra. We can keep reposting, and we can use the internet to push a viral message that counteracts their poison. But more so, we can vote with our wallets, and we don't have to be good little consumers. So make sure you vote with your wallet, and let's make these internationalists count the financial cost of trying to destroy our people. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please help spread the message by liking and sharing it on social networks. If you want to hear more from me, please hit the subscribe button, as new videos are posted every week. You can also read my book, The Fall of Western Man. It's available as a free ebook and in both hardback and paperback, and all the links are in the description below. Finally, if you want to join in the discussion with me, feel free to add me on Facebook, and you can now follow me on Twitter as well. Everyone's welcome.